Good morning. My name is Johan Hutting. I work for ING, which is the biggest bank in the Netherlands. I'm located in Leeuwarden in the top north. We have two main locations. And, well, I'm mostly doing back-end work there. Although, quite some long time ago in my teens, as you can see, my hairline was still a bit further down. I built a chess program because I did have some interest in artificial intelligence. I've also worked on artificial intelligence in games, in Nintendo DS, also a long time ago. So the interest was there. However, I couldn't really apply it at that point. There was no real benefit because all the hardware was not done yet. All the algorithms weren't fully worked out yet. But nowadays, we do have a lot of new technology, promising technology as well. And when you talk about AI with people, then basically you have two kinds of people usually. One is very enthusiastic, like this is the best ever, everything is going to change, and people who say like, oh my God, Skynet is coming for us, but we'll lose our job, the world will go. I'm somewhere in between, fortunately. So I will hope to give you some introduction on what you can expect, and that's not a doom and gloom story. Fortunately, we do have some new promising AI technologies to apply since, well, about 7-8 months. Up and rising almost every day, you will hear something new, including yesterday at Google I/O. The benefits you will gain with them, and of course also which ones to approach with caution, because some parts they do take some troublesome approach. So we'll walk through all of that in the coming hour. So first off, all the new AIs that you're currently seeing are basically GPT APIs. So they are generative pre-trained transformers. And what does that mean? It has to do with text. So this idea was worked out by Google itself, who are now basically running a bit behind and trying to catch up. And it was shared with the world. So don't look too much at the image. It's basically just an explanation of how this algorithm works. But the main benefit is that you can do a lot more processing of a lot more data while keeping context. So all the stuff I did before with my chess engine, in a certain moment you just run into issues because the hardware can't cope up. If there's too much information to handle, you can see the same with Go. A couple of years ago, Go also beat the world champion because of that reason, because we can do a lot more these days. So from 2018 and onwards, due to this paper, people started working out new solutions in AI, and you can mostly see that in the natural language processing, so both text, but also songs, images as well, coupled to text, and the computer vision stuff where patterns are also matched in the same way. And the language models that we have, those are basically built up of two components. You have the LLM, that's the whole big blob of data. And well, as a Dutch DJ once said, once ChatGPT became available, that means you get the average opinion of everyone on the internet, which is basically true. However, that's also a lot of garbage. And to improve upon that, you have the human reinforced learning on top, which allows you to filter out unwanted information or to steer you in the direction that you want as an outcome, which is important with ChatGPT as well. They also have an API in front which stops you from asking certain terms. When it just came out, you could actually ask it to talk like Donald Trump. And about 1 or 2 weeks later, everyone did that. Then they close it off. It's no longer allowed. We don't impersonate real persons. So there's actually a third layer as well on top of that. If you are going to implement something like this yourself, do keep in mind that you can put an API in front and then just call it from Java and use it everywhere where you want. So that's ChatGPT. I am assuming everyone already heard about ChatGPT and played around with it. It's just a very simple website that you can access and ask questions and get feedback and keep context while you have a conversation with this bot. So one of the nice things you can do with it is that you can, someone sends you a very long email, almost 2 screens long. You can just say it, give me the TLDR of this. I don't want to read this, or I have a book. I don't have time to read a book. Please help me out and give me the summary of this book. It does that very well. It can also allow you to explain a subject to someone and ask for clarifications on certain specific parts. So you start high, and I will have an example of that as well, and then dive deeper into the answer that you received from this ChatGPT. It can give you suggestions for names or concepts, so people use it to think up company names. I even suggested someone, you can also pick a baby name with it, but please do talk to your partner before you actually do this. And it's quite good at that. You can just tell, give me 25 names, and you get a lot of names, and you can just pick one that you like. It can also do some poetry. You've seen some examples with haiku, and that's nice. But what I really do like is writing the targeted explanation. So if I have a very difficult to explain technical subject or something with physics, and I want to explain this to a layman or someone who doesn't have a lot of knowledge about the subject, you can also ask ChatGPT to adjust the tone and the words to that public. It can actually also act as a call center agent. You need support with something, you ask questions, and then the context starts building up. That's how it works. And it really works well at that point because it will start to adjust its answers based on the questions and the extra information that you supply to ChatGPT or any GPT-like bot. Another fun one is that you can actually make planned UML diagrams with that. I also have an example of that in this presentation. So usually you do have some ideas and you just start copying around some planned UML stuff and then adjusting it. This will give you a better head start. So it does work out nice. It can also supply you designs for websites. So if you're a web designer on basic websites, well, either specialize yourself or try to do something else, I would say. Because it's too easy to just make a basic layout, and that's taking maybe 2-3 minutes at most. A couple of tries and then, okay, I like this one, I'm done. Where a normal human would take maybe 1 day or even longer to make up a good design to match your vision. And it can actually generate some code examples for instance, challenges that you have for someone you want to hire, but also the challenges you have if you want to write a piece of code and you don't know how to. Normally you would Google that or go to Stack Overflow. How would I resolve this? What options do I have? You can ask ChatGPT this, and it will basically also answer those to you. So you can not just ask for a solution, but also ask to explain the solution and give alternatives and the positives and the downsides of this solution, so you can make a good judgment of that. The feedback on challenges, I'm also involved in sometimes hiring people and asking questions, and well, you do want to get a good overview of who you are hiring. So I just thought, maybe let's have it make up some nice coding examples and see how that works out. However, the examples it gave me 5 perfect examples, but they would take about 1.5 hours to solve. And yeah, that's too much. So the follow-up is, give me some that I can fix in half an hour. So it will quickly answer with the same question that I asked before. It will know the context, and it will come up with different challenges that are actually feasible to do within half an hour. I really like this part because you can have like a conversation and dive deeper. If the conversation goes wrong, which will come up later on, then you can just restart a conversation and try again with some different parameters. If the clicker works. So chatbots. I work at a bank, and well, as you can imagine, a bank, there's a lot of customers. I think we have over 6 million in the Netherlands. They can have issues, so they will call and they need help. And what normally happens is you call someone or you go to the internet and you talk to a bot, and the first thing you want to do is you want to skip it because it doesn't know about you, it won't help you. So at that point, you're not really helped and you're just frustrated because your only trick at that point is, I want to get past this bot as soon as possible. I do see a lot of opportunities here to improve this and have the bot fed with context of you as a customer, so it knows who you are, it knows what products you have, it knows what kind of issues you may have or that you have had in the past, and start answering questions based upon that information and help you reach a solution or connect you to the right person within a much more efficient time. So this is what I will see happening in coming half year to year. That's, if my clicker works, come on. I mentioned planned UML. I am also a software developer, but almost every day, and yeah, you have to talk about these science with your colleagues and align stuff. So you can use whiteboards, but after that's done, then you want to formalize some more stuff. Then you start picking like a UML schema, and you can just give a simple question, and I did try to keep it not too complex because then it wouldn't fit on the screen. But it will allow you to make the basic diagram. You still have to do some adjustments usually, but it is a good head start. You don't have to adjust too much. So this text, which is generated in just 2-3 seconds, already gives this for me. And I can work on this further on. I can even ask it, okay, this is wrong, please correct this part, and it will adjust it for me. All in the same conversation that you're having. The downside, however, is that it is sometimes hallucinating, and it is getting better. If you ask this question to a person, they will say you're insane, that's not possible. But what ChatGPT does, it will answer the question for you. It doesn't even fully understand what an anagram is because it doesn't use all the letters, because the X is double, it just skips it. That's why I also asked it, what's an anagram? So the whole idea within the answering is that it's more important for this AI bot to answer you than it is to have a correct answer. And you can apply some tricks to make this better, but it's still something you have to keep in mind. So whatever you generate with AI, it doesn't have to be the truth. It's based on chance that the words together are most likely to appear, which makes it human-like and quite confident how the text is applied on the screen to you. So you might think, oh, this sounds like a good thing, especially if you're not very knowledgeable about the subject. But you always have to check the answer, because it can just be some random answer that is completely not true. I also have seen code examples where braces were missing. This does never compile. How can you generate this? And that unfortunately does happen. That's the downside of all these AIs. It's all based on chance. So looking at ChatGPT, as I just mentioned, it's a probability matrix. So it's not logic. The style is perfect, but there's no real substance in it. There's no logic behind it. So it can tell you completely illogical things like it's fully correct. That's really, really strange. There was an example with someone talking to Bing about going to the cinema, and it said, no, that movie isn't out yet. And it asked, yeah, but it's out in December 2022. At that point, the person said, yeah, what date is today? It's February, so it should be out. But because ChatGPT underneath does not have the knowledge of this data, it cannot answer you, but it starts to think of an answer to give you. This conversation went on many times, and then it started to become a little bit hostile towards this person. Look, you're wrong. It doesn't play. They did fix that, first by lowering the amount of questions you could ask in one conversation. They did up it, I think, 3 or 4 weeks ago. But that is something to keep in mind. Yeah, as I just mentioned, you have to check the output also as well quite often. So even if you think that this does sound very confident, I can use this, then you still have to get some expert information out as well. Another thing that I didn't really point out earlier, but this applies to most companies, but also to customer data, for instance. You can't just share your customer names and information without the proper security around it. If you do the ChatGPT, it's all open. It's to a Microsoft in essence. You don't know what they will do with it. Maybe they will learn from it. Well, that doesn't have to be a bad thing, but it's very unclear how that information is processed. And actually, Amazon has forbidden people to do this because they started seeing people asking questions and getting answers back on solutions that they've thought out within Amazon and that ChatGPT should not know about. Of course, ideas can be thought of at the same time, but it's still an issue. And I think last week Samsung did the same. They said, don't use this anymore, we will make our own solution in-house. Another nice thing that has been around for quite some time now is the rubber ducky pair programming, as in Copilot, which was free last year. It's paid nowadays. They did use all of basically GitHub to learn all the code, including my wonderful code with a leaky bucket that I didn't want shared, and I didn't have any option in it to deny that. I did add that for people to learn how to not make a leaky application and what happens Copilot starts learning from it. I do hope there's not too many applications like that, because then you do get the bad examples due to chance. But I do consider those tooling basically as a rubber ducky. So it's like a person sitting next to you and advising you like, hey, this might be an interesting option, or perhaps you should write it like this. And most of this is what I've used it on my private PC, because if I use it on my laptop, it will upload things to Copilot, which is not allowed by my employer. But if I'm doing open source projects or have my own code, then it's fine, because I have my own decision in that point. Okay, it's fine that Copilot uses my code to learn from. But it does, in a sense, the same as your autocomplete within IntelliJ. It's just a little bit more smarter, because it has a lot more knowledge about the context of your code and the context of what you're doing or have done in the past. But yeah, like I mentioned, I had on two occasions I had that the curly braces were clearly wrong, so the code wasn't even compiling. So I asked it for some nice addition, and then what happened? I had to fix it by myself and think about it. That's not what I have this bot for. I want good explanations, and it does take you out of the zone at that point. So instead of helping you be fully focused on what you're trying to achieve, it will block you down like, hey, this is not correct. And you start thinking, okay, maybe I should just remove it and do it myself. And that felt really odd to me. It's the same as having someone sitting next to you giving completely unrelated answers as a suggestion, and then you're like, no, let's start again. It does get better, by the way. So that's, and of course, stuff like Copilot is also improving. They have to, especially now that they charge money for what they do. The main things that they support, well, basically all the languages that are mostly available within GitHub, those are the best supported. And Java is quite popular there, so that's a really good support. Python as well. Go was quite well supported in the language suggestions. Kotlin as well, by the way, although it could be better. You do get autocomplete stuff, and that's nice. But what I like most is that I'm writing some comments. I'm writing out my idea. What am I trying to achieve in this method? And it will give me, at that point, the code below. I make some small adjustments, and I can continue. So that's really efficient for my usage. If I'm doing very complex stuff, I don't use it. I will just do my own logic on algorithms and try to figure out what it is. But if it's basic stuff that you would normally, the not that interesting code, then it's really beneficial, because it keeps you in the zone. You can just continue. Okay, this looks good, next. It really speeds up your coding. So almost, 1.5 months ago, 2 months ago, Microsoft announced that they will also add Copilot, and that's not Copilot, by the way, but that's ChatGPT as the solution within Office and Outlook, Word, and PowerPoint. In the sense that you would get automatic email response suggestions. It could make this PowerPoint for me, which would be nice, but I still want my own input there, so I'm still curious how it will work out. And yesterday, Google also announced at Google I/O that they will also do the same within Gmail and the Google Office suites up to a certain level. So I'm also curious how that will how they compare to each other. Because there is a big chance that you're doing this wrong, and then at that point the experience drops down and you will go to the alternative. So it's an interesting time in that aspect. And like I'm mentioning, the quality is really so-so at times. And at that point, you really feel I'm brought out of focus. This shouldn't happen. So, and as also mentioned, yeah, you do share your code if you don't pay for Copilot with an enterprise license. So even if you have the normal paid license, the private license, your code is shared with Copilot. It can learn from it. If you're okay with that, no issue. But if you're running this on company code and your company does not allow this, do keep this in mind. It's potentially quite a big issue. Another one that's worth mentioning is that there are lawsuits regarding the use of those open source code in GitHub, basically. Like I mentioned, my leaky bucket application was also used, and I didn't want it. I didn't have any option to say, no, please don't do that, and leave it out. I do have other code that is fine to use, but not this one. There's also people who think that I put my code in GitHub, but I didn't put it up to be used for learning and for a commercial product like Copilot. So this might have some consequences later on, including legislation from both US, Europe, etc. Another one I checked out was Code Whisperer. Well, that's Amazon's answer. And well, in general, I found that the quality there was much better. And let's go one back. I think the main reason why is because they use it on their own smaller code base and more curated code. Because anyone can upload code to GitHub. That's including students doing their assignments, still learning the craft. So the quality might be lesser than what Amazon is offering us. At the moment, it's free to use. There's no option to not share code with them. So that's something to keep in mind. So for ING, I can't use it. The Kotlin code that I did with it, well, also the suggestions were much better. I was much more in the zone. I was much faster. I was much, and overall, I was thinking that the code that I received was of a better quality, but that's subjective. So, and yeah, as mentioned, there are still some issues here, like what's happening to the code that you're sharing, and those bad examples that take you out of the zone that are costing you a lot of time. So this is very promising technology. If you're in the zone and you're coding and it's fast and it's giving you the right answers, and even if you're asking for more options, it really helps out. I really thought it was an addition to what I'm working on, and really well, creating value for me. But yeah, then you come to the issue, I cannot share my domain knowledge outside the organization. If I start talking about competitive products in ING and it's stored there, what's happening to it? We don't know. And are you allowed to share code outside your organization? Officially, I'm not. So what can I do? A solution for this would be to run something like this on-premise. So within ING network itself, ING managed, but with the underlying LLM. So I would expect Copilot, maybe also Code Whisperer, maybe to offer that in the future as well as a product. Just install it locally on your server. Have your own code preferences installed. Another one that I did notice is the boring code. Even though it is generating it quite well, boring code is boring, so you're not paying attention to it. So if it's wrong, it will stay wrong. I'm also still not very convinced what will happen if you start making unit tests or integration tests with AI. Because if that is wrong, who will understand that? Who will correct that? And if you don't pay attention to that, it's easy to leave it in. And then after 1 month or later, you have a big incident that you have to explain, and you can't because, well, you didn't create it. The one that's troubling me most is how new developers will start to learn and improve their craft. Because you learn by doing, you learn by failing, you learn by discussing. Well, the discussing part is there, that's good. You can also ask it to elaborate why solutions are good or bad. But if you just copy-paste, 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 it's like a developer that only uses Stack Overflow to create the solutions. Just copy-paste your solutions and, well, don't really care about what happens to it. If I have an incident at my normal work, I will solve it, but then I also try to figure out, why did this happen? Why didn't I see this before? What can I learn from this? And that's something that a solution like this doesn't do for you. So if you're a junior and you still need to go all the way to become an experienced expert, how will you do that? Obviously, we'll figure out how, but that will be quite a challenge. So I also used it for the interviews to generate examples. And if you're doing this and you are allowing people to use Copilot or ChatGPT, then do keep this in mind and just be open about it. It's something to keep in mind as well. Because then you do test people on their skill to use those new AI solutions. And maybe that's not something that will happen the coming months, but over time, and perhaps next year, that will certainly start happening, I expect. Another interesting one, maybe not per se for a developer, but in general, is that you can now generate images. I did keep this one in because I thought it was quite funny. I asked it to paint a robot that was painting a painting, in the sense of using a lot of words and see what happens. So I made a robot painting, but it doesn't fully understand the context because it does have 3 painting panels. I didn't ask it to make 3, it just made it up themselves. But you can see that the robot is also painted in between on the wall. So it's interesting, but it's not fully there yet. The one I'm mostly playing around with, because I do think we should run this kind of things locally until all the dust has settled and all the legal stuff is cleared. And, well, you know what happens to your cloud solutions. This one, Stable Diffusion, can actually run on your local hardware. And I have a MacBook, and then it's very easy to run Diffusion B or run some Python scripts and generate images. You can also ask it to make one image to a different image. The image you saw in the previous slide is also generated by a Stable Diffusion. The quality is so-so at times, so sometimes I just let it run, make me 100 images and I'll pick a nice one. So trying to fine-tune a bit with the settings, adding some words, removing some context, and then until you get something that, okay, this is nice, I would like to keep this. The difficult part in this, if you want to make several identical images. So if I would have a presentation with a lot of identical images, that will be really hard to achieve because of all the randomizing going on in the results that you're receiving. Stable Diffusion is really nice in essence because you can also add your own images. So if you have branded images, which is my original idea for this presentation, we have a brand portal with over 6,000 images that I can use. However, those are not always very useful for what you're doing. And I thought, oh, maybe just pick a couple of thousand of those images. They have the same style. I will just let Stable Diffusion generate all my images for me. However, once I started doing that, I realized that I'm not allowed to do this because all the photographers who added their stock images to our portal, they didn't sign up for any legal document that they are okay with using this within an AI storage. So unfortunately, I couldn't show you that. Otherwise, I would have had all generated images within my PowerPoint. What I do see happening is that we are going to ask permission for this, and they are going to charge more for this, just to, well, do keep a living at that point. Because you do need the initial data, and that's also one of the discussion parts, along with GitHub, but also with ChatGPT, that used all of the internet, more or less, to learn all this. No one gave permission for this. So you do need all this data to build a useful model. And if you don't have any fast MacBook or PC, then you can also use the Hugging Face solution. It's called Stable Diffusion there as well. And I think you can generate 20 within half an hour or something like that. That's quite nice. It's the same thing as running it local, but it's a bit slower. Then other solutions, DALL-E was basically, I think, the first one that appeared that uses GPT-3 in the background. The horse with the astronaut on top is one of the famous ones. People started using it for memes as well. And they were free initially, but after you use a certain amount, then you had to pay for it. So, and it's all in the cloud. And I prefer something that I can just run on my own laptop at the moment, so I can more fiddle with it whenever I want to without having to generate hundreds of extra images. Midjourney is the most famous one at the moment. Well, you can see the Pope next to it. That's one of the generated ones, and it does look really good. It does look realistic. You still, if you look well, you can still see, okay, this is like a very good painting, but it's not the real thing yet. But maybe in V6 or V7, we will see that it's really completely photorealistic, that you cannot distinguish between what is real, what is not. And that's the interesting one. After this picture, before you could just say, oh, give me 25, I can just play around with it a bit. They started charging because people were misusing. And the examples given at that point were both this picture and the one with Trump. I think the guy who was a journalist, I think, for Washington Post, who generated those, he was actually thrown off and banned from the server for doing that, for misusing the technology. Another thing to mention here is that Xi Jinping, the leader of China, you're not allowed to generate pictures of him. That's completely blocked. So there is some filtering and censoring going on. People are working around that by saying, oh, give me a picture of the current leader of China, and then it does work. So you cannot fully filter everything. So the copyright and usage issue is the main issue here. We're still not sure what to do with this. I ran into this with my own solution, like, hey, I can generate a lot of cool images to use in my presentation. That's nice. And then you realize, okay, I can't actually, because, well, that might cause issues for my employer. There's also several lawsuits at the moment going on about this. So what use is this for developers? I do still use it personally, but then for, I need some icon ideas. So at that point, it will start also generating things, and then you can work on or extend on those icons and make those more in line with each other, because that's the main challenge I see, keeping things in the same branding idea, basically. I also use it for this. Just give me a design. And as you can see, because it's all a bit randomized, the lines on the right are not fully aligned as well. So it's very good, but it's not perfect. And this for me also works fine. I can just generate some screens and start building applications, and just what you normally would do on a whiteboard. So the pitfalls that are around, there's bias. Well, everyone knows bias, and sometimes bias can be good, but most of the times it's not. It's all probability. So depending on what you feed it, and with ChatGPT you feed it all of the internet, then you also get all of the internet in opinion. And we all know how that can be. So that's quite an issue. How are you going to handle that? One of the talks yesterday also mentioned when you are hiring people and using AI to filter, and there's 3 women signing up and 100 guys, then, well, those women will probably fall out due to the numbers and due to the probability. That's something to keep in mind. That is also bias. And people are biased too. But the algorithm doesn't learn by itself. It doesn't adjust itself. As a human, we know this, okay, yeah, we only have a small amount of women signing up, then we should adjust for that. The AI does not do that by itself. It needs the human input to do this. And we do realize that we learn from this, we grow from this, and that's something an AI and algorithm cannot do. So the nuance, the human touch, that is still necessary. You will still need to be doing that the coming years. Maybe in the far future, things will be different, who knows, but this is still needed. And this is no different from then the moment that I was building my chess program. I also had an opening book in there that was self-learning. When it lost games from certain players, it will, okay, I won't play this again against this player. It had an endgame solution because there were endgame tables at that point, but they only went to 5 or 6 pieces. And after that, they would just become too big. The hardware couldn't handle it. I also built some logic about that, also some self-learning, like you end up here, you start losing stuff, don't do this again. If my clicker works, there you go. So something to keep in mind with bias or other unwanted behavior, you want to correct it, that's fine, but when you do that, you can introduce new bias by overdoing it. So how do you know it will work well? So the only thing to do this is test properly, not just after you released an AI solution, but before. And after you do changes, every time you should check, am I not doing the wrong things? Of course, there are some cases where bias is fine. If you're looking for hires and you want certain skills, then you are focusing on those skills, and that's fine bias. And you are filtering out those that do not fully conform to that. And that's something to keep in mind. And it's difficult to get a good solution. That's really something that works for everyone, or works for your organization, or for you, for your specific use cases. So Stack Overflow is, well, quite clear in this. They said, no, we will stop this, because they were flooded with people, well, maybe trying to score points, I don't know. But they were really flooded with submissions that were not, sometimes not correct, sometimes correct, but just too much per day. And as Stack Overflow is run by experts, all those experts were completely overwhelmed with the amount of information they had to check, including the normal people creating answers on questions on Stack Overflow. So they decided to fully ban it for now. They considered it harmful because, yeah, you are rehashing, and that's the main issue with these AI solutions. You are basically parroting and mimicking existing behavior. And part of the creativity we have in programming and development is that you try out new stuff and do new stuff, learn new things. And if you just mimic and parrot, you don't do anything new. You can combine ideas, but it's quite an interesting one how that will be solved in the future, because there's just an overload of information at a certain point, and how are we going to handle that as a person? Not just from Stack Overflow, but also news messages, blog posts, presentations, learnings. If you generate those by AI, who will guard the quality of that information? So in the Netherlands, it was a lot of news as well that the schools basically ran into issues because kids would just generate summaries, and the teachers could no longer check if those were plagiarized because all the texts were different in some way or the other. That's the benefit of AI. You can tell it to be unique, and then it is. I think in academics, it's not that much of a challenge, because if you do a thesis and you have to defend that thesis, you still have to have the knowledge and the skills to actually defend that. So yeah, it would help you, but it won't kill the academic culture there. You will still need to do the work, still have to have the knowledge. So it might even cause us to become better in our academics as well. The uncanny valley is one that I personally am attached with. It's like I'm getting an email from someone, and it was mostly triggered by the Microsoft example. And it's a couple of paragraphs, and okay, you read it, you spend time on it, but all that person did was just press 2 to get an answer and automatically send it. That does feel strange. So yesterday I was at a session with Steven Janssen. He also mentioned, I have to send out 900 emails to people to tell them, sorry, you're not in. And at that point, generate a somewhat personalized message, but it does include the footer that says this is generated by AI. And at that point, it's fine, because then you know, okay, great message, and you're not fooled by it, basically. But if you are, then I feel it's really odd. Are you just going to automatically reply to people? Then that's not very personal anymore. So how are we going to cope with that? That's an interesting one to see for the coming years, how we will come along with that. One of the issues with ChatGPT that I think almost no one knows is that in the guidelines, in the rules, it says that you are the owner, and you have to actually notify people below the text that it was generated by ChatGPT. I think almost no one does this. And the same with the code. If you get code, you paste it in, you're responsible. That is in a way not different from Stack Overflow, because you also copy-paste it there. And if you create a bug, well, that's your own issue. You should have checked the code better. You can use it as a reference, but not as a full solution. But it is something to keep in mind. You are the owner. There's no responsibility at all with those AI-generated solutions online, but also offline as well. The copyrighted art, I mentioned it. It also applies to music. And if you're wondering why is music not done by AI, because that should be so easy. There's only so many patterns that are nice to listen to. It's because it's fully copyrighted, and they are actually going to drag you to court if you try to do that. I think 1 month ago there was one solution that combined songs. So you could have a different artist sing a song for you, automatically generated based on the voice. And that was taken online 1 or 2 days afterwards. Because, well, you will be dragged to court, and it will be very costly. So also with the images that you might use, do take care. The images themselves are not copyrighted, by the way. That's something to keep in mind. There was one case, I think last December or January in America, where someone made a comic with it. They tried to copyright it. It was accepted. Then it was challenged. And at that point, they decided, no, you can only copyright the collection of the images, but the images themselves, you're free to copy them. So if you add them to a different order, then you can make your own, well, stolen product at that point. And we'll have to see how that works out. So the takeaways I had from a developer perspective, what can I do with this, is that I will advise everyone to just experiment with this. try playing with it. If there's a new solution, look what it means for you. How can you apply this? Maybe you can't even apply it yet. Just check it out and see what is possible. Maybe you can have actually some new ideas and new possibilities. But I think to keep in mind is, well, be vigilant. Do keep in mind that it's still very Wild West at the moment. There's no guidelines. There's no law protecting us. You are uploading stuff to companies and you don't know what they're going to do with it, including Microsoft and Google. So you could say, yeah, they have a fine track record, so it's okay, but your legal department probably won't agree with you on that. And the most interesting part is creating value. And it's not just value in your output, but also in your personal learning, because when you code and you get some, it's really like having a new student coming along or an intern and also asking you questions when you're building stuff. You also learn from that, even though they are still new and you're quite expert at what you're doing. I think the AI also fits that place for you. So it will help you out to become better, to be more creative, get more ideas, and, well, in that way also generate value. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead. I don't think we have a microphone, but...
How will it change developers that doesn't know them?
Oh God, I can't hear you.
My question is, how will developers change? Because I think that developers who will choose not to change at all, basically will die out, as I see it. Same way as people who came for courses, they did die out, but they're not that much needed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the question is, how will developers change based on this? And what I think is we're already used to this. If you would ask me 5 years ago, where will be now, and the same 5 years before that, I wouldn't be able to tell you. Things go so fast. We are already trained to be an agile developer at that point. You should be used to change. You should embrace change. And you will always have people that get stuck in the old ways. We still have COBOL developers, for instance. I don't know why, but they're still here. But then at some point, you do know that your work will die out, or you will have to find something else. And I can fully understand if a current day developer who is having a lot of fun developing as it is now, in a year from now will say, no, I don't like it anymore, I will go find something else to do. That's fully likely. But in general, I think most developers will start using the tooling and improve themselves that way. It's a bit fluid. It will start growing on people. Yeah, I'll walk forward again, sorry.
Are there some specific things to know for Java developers in contrast with other developers?
Yeah, so the question is, are there any specific things for Java developers as compared to other developers? I don't think the language matters, actually, because a lot of stuff is done in Python nowadays as the connecting layer, but you're fine to apply your own logic on top of that. Well, Steven Janssen mentioned yesterday he had an API built in Python and then just called it with Java, so you can call it with Kotlin as well. So you create an extra integration layer on top of that. There's no real solution restricted to a certain language that you can't use it. The models themselves are running within the engine and responding with the answers to the questions that you're basically suggesting them within the context of your conversation. And it doesn't really matter if you use Java or not at that point. And I'm also developing in Kotlin, but also in C for my private projects. I'm not language bound. I use tooling and solutions that help me find a good, an efficient solution. So if Java is the best solution, I will use Java. If Kotlin is, etc. And I don't think there's any restriction on those toolings. Does that answer your question? All the way in the back. Oh dear. Okay.
With AI generating so much content, it's probably going to get to a point where it eclipses our content, I guess. And so when I'm using ChatGPT for some code, for example, is there a point where it's probably just going to be using loads of AI examples? Is that going to be a problem?
Yeah, that's something I'm also keeping in mind. So the question is it going to be a problem if you start using AI to generate solutions and it learns from this? That is killing your creativity, basically, because you're mimicking, you're parroting, and you're not trying something new at that point. So that's why I also don't expect any challenge for all those here or for myself, because we're already experienced. I do see some challenges for those that still need to learn and still need to make those steps to become creative. And if we continue to make it automatically respond to our questions and then generating solutions at that point, so fully generated AI applications, where it's learning from again, you have the reinforcement from that AI logic, and you're basically at a standstill. And looking at humanity and how we've acted in the past, we always find a way. So in that aspect, I'm not fully pessimistic, but I do think it's a challenge. Okay, then I would like to thank you for your time.